begin with Trace Gallagher with the very latest from our breaking news desk. Trace?
Megyn, ISIS has singled out major cities like New York and D.C. as attack targets, but the entire country is certainly more on edge today than it was a week ago. And that concern is being echoed by the federal government. The FBI, Homeland Security, Joint Terrorism Task Forces are all, quote, heightening their posture through the holiday season because the holidays tend to offer more target-rich environments. So everyone from travelers to shoppers to sports fans can expect to see a much larger physical law enforcement presence at highly populated areas. For example, in D.C., residents will see random bag checks at train stations and armed guards around the Capitol. But the real key to the so-called heightened presence is the unseen law enforcement, the ones monitoring surveillance and gathering intelligence. The FBI is vowing to follow up every lead and credible tip that comes in, which means increasing the number of agents working round the clock at field offices from coast to coast. No easy task, considering the FBI is now investigating some 900 ISIS-related individuals. And of those, the Kelly file has learned that, quote, dozens are being intensely watched because they are believed to be ISIS sympathizers deemed a high risk for copycat attacks. Listen.
Together, we are watching people of concern using all of our lawful tools. We will keep watching them, and if we see something, we'll work to disrupt it. That's what we're doing about it.
But consider that one day of round-the-clock surveillance on a single ISIS target might involve 30 agents. The FBI director says the number of Americans traveling to Syria to join ISIS is dropping, but he admits that might be because ISIS is urging people not to travel so they can kill where they are. So far, we're told there is no credible threat to the homeland, but France was also working under the no credible threat umbrella. Megyn.
Exactly right, Trace. Thank you. So what does this mean for America right now? Tim Clemente is a retired FBI counterterrorism agent who advised the U.S. military in Iraq. Seth Jones served as advisor to the commanding general, U.S. Special Operations Forces in Afghanistan, and director of the International Security and Defense Policy Center at the RAND Corporation. Thank you both for being here. Tim, let me start with you. There's no credible threat, and yet we see ISIS twice in 2 days come out with a threat against the United States. It was Washington, D.C., it was Times Square, and now today it's specifically the White House. And in this message they say, we will destroy your towers, speaking to the U.S. and France, we will destroy your towers, and goes on to say, we have started by you, we will end at the so-called White House, which we will turn into black with our fires. Your take on it?
Well, I would say some of what they're saying, Megyn, is obviously braggadocious. They're trying to make themselves appear bigger than they are. The threat is obviously very real. There, as Spencer or Trace just said in that segment, that there was no credible threat before the Paris attacks. We don't necessarily have to have intelligence in order for an attack to occur. It doesn't work that way. It's the other way around. An attack sometimes occurs without intelligence, and we use intelligence sometimes to preempt attacks. In this case, Director Comey wants the American people to be vigilant, but not to live in fear. Because vigilance is good. Overwhelming fear causes people to do things that don't necessarily help law enforcement. We do not want hundreds of thousands of calls going to the local police, the federal authorities like the FBI, that are suspicious activities that have no credible threat in them. So people need to be vigilant, be aware of their surroundings, and look for things that really matter, and then notify authorities.
Seth, I know you're concerned because we have brushed ISIS back somewhat. They were in a much more aggressive position a year ago, 10 months ago. And your message is that is when terrorist groups like this sometimes increase the terrorism on their Western targets and other targets even more so.
Megyn, that's right. I mean, what we've seen in a few cases historically, we've seen it most recently with al-Shabaab, is as they've actually lost ground in areas, and just think for a moment, ISIS is now, every major power, every neighboring country is now targeting it in Iraq and Syria. We've seen with some recent historical patterns like al-Shabaab in Somalia that they increase in these situations their terrorist strikes against malls, against universities. Well, it's because they're not controlling the ground that they used to, so they're taking those resources and putting it to terrorist attacks. They also do it in some cases. We saw it in Spain in 2004 to try to get foreign forces out of their lands. And remember, in Spain, after the Madrid attacks, the Spanish pulled their forces out of Iraq, so they coerced them.
What about this, the FBI director saying they've got 900 ISIS individuals that they're watching, dozens intensely being watched, and dozens of potential copycats that they're keeping a close look at, Tim? I mean, what we were told is that the FBI only has the ability to monitor 60 to 70 people 24/7. So if that's true, the math suggests there could be others who they are not monitoring 24/7. And what do we do about them? Because I just had Congressman McCall on the other day, and I said, what are we doing about increasing the FBI funding? And basically the answer was nothing.
Well, the FBI has to work with the resources it has, and I'm sure many, many agents, especially in New York and Washington, are taxed to the hilt. They're probably working round-the-clock shifts without days off. It happens oftentimes, especially around the holidays, when there's an increased awareness or a specific threat. So the FBI is going to do the best that they can. They're going to try and look at the individuals that look most suspicious. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean physically. It means their activities. They're a little more active on email or on Twitter or dealing with overseas personnel that may be suspicious. So it's a tough job. It's an impossible job to complete 100% effectively.
What about we're going to get to this later in the show, but now there are reports that ISIS has its eyes set on chemical weapons. How hard would that be, Seth? Because we know Al-Qaeda's they've been shooting for that for 20 years, and they haven't, as far as we know, gotten it, and they certainly haven't been able to launch an attack against the West with it.
Well, Megyn, we know that ISIS has tried to get their hands on sarin. It's used mustard in the Iraq-Syria context. To actually get those materials into the U.S. or to try to conduct an attack in the U.S. using chemical or biological weapons would be pretty difficult. There are very few organizations, one of them is Aum Shinrikyo in Japan, that have attempted to do this. They didn't kill a lot of people, but they did scare a lot of people. But to actually execute the attack and to get the ingredients in a pure form or to aerosolize them and get them out into a neighborhood does take some level of sophistication. Mm-hmm. It's not clear that they have it, at least at this point.
Just want to say before we go, and I don't think we say it enough, that we ran the stats tonight, just to remind folks, you have a much better chance of being killed by a bolt of lightning or by a shark attack than you do of dying in a terrorist attack. And the terrorists win when they instill that fear of going outside, fear of eating at a cafe, of going to a shopping mall. And that's what the FBI director was trying to bring home tonight. Gentlemen, thank you.